everything's fine. Wouldn't expect any more from this. The situation's in life.
Good morning, Miss Lisa. She's a pretty girl. This is our Mama Lisa right here. She's got some beautiful horns, great hide. She's not going anywhere anytime soon. We like her. She does jump fences though, don't you? Her and this little bull, his name is Tim. This is Tim and Lisa, kind of like Tim and Lisa off of Heartland. I don't know, I didn't name them. I traded these guys for, Tim and Lisa I traded for our old skid steer that I never finished getting running, and then Red and her little baby behind me, which you can't see. I traded them for our old square baler. It was a Ford 532 square baler. It was kind of a cool little square baler, but she doesn't like me messing with her horns, but I like touching her horns.
Everything's fine. Wouldn't expect any more from this. The situation's in line.
I'm gonna be in a whole other world of trouble here. See, it's supposed to rain and it's supposed to be dark.
Part of farm life.
Is right. Just don't want to go off and see the random. Yeah, like. Then they run into kids.
Well, the good thing about being down here is there's not too many small children. And if they go through that section of woods, they're just going to end up on the other side of the road.
I'm standing up in our paddocks right now where we've tried, our cows keep getting out. And I'm not sure where they get out along the fence line. I found some spots in our big field. So I took them out of the big field, I put them in the small field. They were here for about a week, and then I got a call. They were in the neighborhood behind us.
So this is the situation. Not our land.
And so what we then tried to do is bring them up and put them up in our paddock space up here where I'm standing, and just hold them there while we go back and check the fence lines. The cow's been right here. You need to come see this. The cows have been all through here. But this fence up to the corner so far is fine. She's been right in here.
If I were a cow. Holy poison knife. Oh, I see it.
So these tree branches need to be cleared off, and we need to stretch a wire back across to this post, and I'm guessing there's some trees down over there on top of the fence as well, so that's too low.
So what I was saying before is, what if we just move the fence?
Well, right here, I don't think that matters because our property line flag, the property line flag is somewhere. It might be further up, so.
Go ahead and cross and see.
Footprints in here. I can't tell if these are cow or not.
Are they? Is there impact and sliding?
Not really. These might be deer. But this is definitely a place where deer go in and out frequently.
With no fence. And look at that huge poison ivy.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
But this is what I'm saying. Like right now, to secure this, you'd be better off taking some clippers and getting rid of all this stuff and just putting a new wire across to that post.
I don't even see the post. Oh, in there.
Down along here,
Hello, little
we've
metal
got
T-post.
more trees on the line. So it would just be a matter of restringing this section with like a top wire and then pulling up and stretching the bottom wires. But this is definitely a crossing path.
Mm-hmm.
We could walk.
how else did you expect us to go other than walking? Flying?
I was just saying
Walkable?
you could just step right over. So this is definitely not going to keep the cows in. And there's cow poop, which means they're coming up in here.
Quite the MacGyver you are. And there's our property line marker.
Yeah, this is it. This is what I was thinking. This whole section is bad. And
So-
technically we should be turning and going through the woods right here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, technically all that's our land. We just don't have it fenced.
Right.
It's just because the existing fences were just here. This was probably at one point the path of least resistance, which it no longer is. Well,
So, but they could also, if they get on that side of the fence, they can get stuck over there without us taking the old fence down.
yeah.
So that is a problem. This just needs to be like pulled up. All these old wood posts, I guess that's okay for now. I mean, as far as just mending it, she can jump stuff that high, so a new top line has to run.
Lisa. That darn purdy cow.
And at least the cattle, the field fence down below, will keep the calves from trying to get through there. This section here is okay. It's higher up.
It's been reinforced. Was that what we did last year?
It may have been. There's a path that's still visible through here from animals. And while they were up here, they started jumping this fence. Now this fence is, I guess this is the highest point right here. And it probably, before they jumped it, this wire was a little higher, but I want to say that this fence is about this high on me. So our cows can jump fences that are about this high pretty comfortably. It's weird because we had a thoroughbred jumper out here for quite some time, and when we put him up in the paddocks, he hated it, but he didn't jump the fence. We put our Longhorns up here, and they're jumping the fence. They jumped right through here, where you feel like you've got plenty of blockage from trees and stuff. I had panels all along the fence line, and I thought this spot was high enough and secure enough. This top wire is loose now because she got caught on it as she went over. This will not hold a Longhorn cow. So what I'm going to be doing now is changing the fencing. We didn't like this fence in the first place. It needs to be torn down and just taken out. I hate barbed wire fences in general. This does have cattle fencing down low, but our calves can jump this as well. So there's really no point in having this at all. I have started to install a new fence. This new fence is going to be installed with 6.5 foot posts. I'll have red brand field fence up to about here. After the 6.5 foot posts are installed, they're about 6 feet tall. So the top section here will have 2 strands of barbed wire. So I'm going to start my fencing right here on this old telephone pole. This telephone pole's not used anymore. It was here to bring power to our barn. Our barn's falling down, the power's cut off. It's all completely useless. Most of the time when I ask the power company to leave poles behind, they leave them. In this case, they leave this pole behind. I'll fill it up high and just let it fall out here, and then I'll cut it up and use it for more fence posts. But that is pretty secure in the ground. I can pull tight on that, and I'm not going to pull that post down. I mean, when they put these telephone poles in the ground, they're put in there to hold a lot of tension pretty high up. So I'm starting on this pole, and I'm going to stretch down towards where I'm building my gates for this new paddock. And this new paddock is going to be different than our old one. It's going to be a much larger space up here. It's going to be our holding pen for the cows when we don't want them getting out. And we'll have some hay feeders up here, but it will also serve as a spot for our kids to ride horses if we have the cows out in the field and we want to bring the horses up. So basically, if you look beyond the fallen tree right there, that tree I tore out with a tractor. It was growing up in our barn, and it needs to be chopped up and burned. But this section, which is a pretty wide section of grass here, from where you see the tree line out to where you see these posts back and you see a gate down there and the fence line that I ran earlier this spring. This will kind of be an alleyway. And so we'll be able to put cows into that field back there, which goes on back and around and into the woods. They love that field. The cows love the woods. And then there'll be another gate right here that'll allow us to put animals into this spot. And then this is just gonna fence off and over. Where our barn is currently located, actually needs to move this way a little bit. So when I rebuild the barn, it'll probably be right about here with a pass through down into this alleyway. But that way we can move the animals around and it's pretty secure. I can get hay equipment around and easily turn into all the fields. So this is going to be a nice little setup when I'm done. But right now, what I'm trying to do is just go ahead and get this area fenced in and across so that I can let the cows out and they can graze for a bit. So I've got a lot of work to do right here. So you'll notice right here, I've got a lot going on. This is a center post, and then I've got a post on each side and a post going towards the back. And then I have these diagonals in here, and I'm not done building this out yet, but the gist of this is the diagonals help keep this post secure. These top posts help keep the side posts secure. And before I go out and stretch down towards where the cows are now, I'm gonna add another diagonal coming off of that post that'll be in line with the fence. And that way, it'll really make this thing secure as far as going back and forth right here. I'm gonna do a similar thing on these posts here. I'm gonna have a diagonal, and then a top cross post. Now, if I just put a post in the ground with a diagonal, hold it. Now, if I just put a post in the ground with a diagonal and I try and stretch my fence tight, what's gonna happen is it's actually gonna pull the post out of the ground. I need to make sure that as I build these out, I'm top bracing them as well as putting in the diagonals so that as this post starts to pull, it hits that post, and between the two diagonals and the top brace, it should keep them from coming out of the ground. I'm using all recycled posts for this project. So they are pretty high, and they're pretty high because I want to make this fence intimidating. You'll notice that even my posts back here are the 6.5 foot posts, which extend up about 6 feet after I install them in the ground. I don't think the cows are gonna wanna jump this fence when I'm done with it. I think it'll be intimidating enough for them to keep them in here. And like I said, this is going to be our holding pen. If we have a bull, which we do have a bull, we have a bull baby right now, we want to be able to put them up somewhere that they're not going to test. And if these cows are jumping chest high, that means I got to take my fence up so high that when they look at it, they think there's no way I'm even going to try that. And it needs to be tight. So all of my diagonals need to be strong. These posts need to be strong. I'm not using any concrete to put these in the ground. I basically drilled some holes with my tractor auger because that's what I have. I'd love to be able to just pound these things in the ground, but even then, one of the problems that we have on our property is that when you get a couple feet down, particularly in this area, you hit a shale type rock. It's a very hard, purplish, soily type rock, and it makes it for a very hard ground. If you hit it the right way, it cracks. And it kind of looks like concrete, but if you hit it the wrong way, you'll bend a bit. If you look at the bit on the back of our tractor, it's all bent up from this particular type of ground. In fact, it's so bent up right now, I won't even attempt to go through it. So I can only get these posts into the ground a couple feet before they're 1.5 to 2 feet before I start, hitting that, and I can't really dig through it anymore, at least not with the equipment I have. If you had, one of the augers that they used to put those telephone poles in, you could probably go right through it. But realistically, I have to, as somebody on a farm, I have to deal with what I have. The cross bracing that I'm doing is going to make these posts strong enough that I won't have an issue with it.
What about the world we both believed in? What about the word that made it so? What about your blood boiled in creases? When you're just aching for her like you could blow. You're like a broken record.
Okay, so I got my diagonals put on. My next step is to install my top brace, and that should keep these from moving as I stretch my fence across them. You'll notice that when I put my diagonals in, I dig them into the ground. And when I do it between posts like this, I dig it into the ground and put it against the bottom of the next post. The reason why I dig these into the ground is to help brace them against the pressure as I pull the fence in that direction. If they're above ground, they can come up, they can come loose, an animal could kick them. But when they're in ground like this, after a few rains and the soil has had time to settle in around them, they're not gonna come out of the ground. Now the bottoms of these posts that I'm using for diagonals are creosote treated. Some states you can't get creosote treated, some states you can. You have to buy them from a licensed facility. These posts I got used at auction, so they just came that way. But I do like the creosote treated, they won't rot out. Those are pretty coated down at the bottom. I think somebody probably recoated those specifically for this purpose, using them as diagonals going into the ground like this.
What about the road less traveled? What about the chance we would take?
Just do the bottom ones for now, and then we'll, after I stretch out the top, we'll do the top ones. Okay? You can use a combination thereof, these tools.
What about the bright and shiny future we would
Okay, let's do it on the one I just stretched first. This one. Yeah. So I have finished our fence, and as you can see, I've got the cattle fence down here, and then I've got 1, 2, 3 strands of barbed wire. These are all pulled pretty tight as I can get them without pulling the posts out. And actually at one end it's connected to a wood fence, and it kind of pulled the fence slightly. But the reason why I've got these so tight is because if this even looks flimsy to Lisa, she's just gonna knock it over. I also added every so many feet a wire that connects all of my barbed wire to this fence. And the reason for that is she has horns, and so she'll come by and try and lift this. If she realizes it's loose, she'll just kind of wedge between and then jump kind of under the barbed wire and over the fence. So I've watched her enough to know what it is that she does to figure out how to build this to secure them. And the thing about a fence is if you build it to the point where it doesn't look like it's worth challenging, they're not going to challenge it. And that's really the best type of fence. The best type of fence is a fence that they don't feel that they can challenge, because they're not going to challenge it if they feel like it's too much for them, and then they won't get hurt challenging it. Whereas a rickety fence, something where they feel like they might be able to get through, they're going to challenge. And that's when cows get stuck, they get scraped up on barbed wire, they get hurt. So a fence like this is probably just the safest fence. It comes up high enough that she doesn't feel comfortable jumping this high. She's not going to jump this high. Now there is a cow named Luna somewhere that can jump 6 feet, but our cows, I don't think they can jump 6 feet. This is not quite 6 feet because I'm 6 foot. It's probably 5.5 feet, but it's high enough that they don't want to mess with this fence. And that's what is important to me. But we've got this entire fence done. They've got maybe 3-4 acres that they can kind of rummage around on until I can get the rest of our perimeter fence done the same way. We want these fences to be about this high. We've decided we don't want to just do the cattle fence. We want the cattle fence with the 3 strands of barbed wire on top of it, because it will completely discourage the animals from trying to get out. And that I think is really important to us. We don't want anybody thinking they can get away with anything. You'll notice that I have a lot going on here from my corner bracing. I have, coming long ways with the fence, I have 2 big posts. They're both cross braced into the ground. Then they have a top piece, and then it goes out the sides, something similar. And then I have some pieces triangulating across the top. And the reason why I have so much bracing on these posts are actually in the ground fairly good, but we've had so much rain, the ground is so wet, it's pulling the posts. Every time I try and pull the wire on it, it's pulling the posts. I don't have time to concrete them in. I don't have time to let them sit and the ground dry out. And even if I did, chances are the ground's going to end up pulling the posts anyway. These are in the ground probably 2 feet, and they were still pulling pretty hard. I can't go much deeper than that on our property because of the subsoil. We have different parts of our property with different types of soil, and this is probably one of the hardest areas. You have some great topsoil, but then when you get down not too low, you start getting into some really hard type rock, shale type, whatever it is. I don't know what you would call it. And so cross bracing it like this, these are pretty strong, they're not moving anywhere. All of these cross bracings are held on by timber lock screws, which are basically like having lag bolts. And I've got 2 timber lock screws at each connection to help keep it from twisting. This structure is solid. It's not going to move anywhere, and that's more important to me than looks. My wife and kids actually kind of like the looks of it. They say it reminds them of out west. And maybe they have, soil conditions like we do in some certain areas, and they've got to figure out, creative ways to really brace these things. But I'm using all used posts for this project, which is kind of another unique thing. Is everything that we have, everything that we're using, is all recycled materials. You'll notice some of these posts are a little darker than other posts. That's because they were originally treated with creosote, and we can still get our hands on creosote treated wood at our local lumber yard that supplies posts. In fact, these posts originally came from there, and then we've got a few pieces that are just regular treated down here. But for the most part, this structure is pretty sound. It's not going anywhere for a while. These posts aren't going to rot out for a while, and as it rains and it allows the soil to settle around the posts, our soil eventually hardens up like concrete when it stops raining. But right now it's just so wet and mucky, and I like the fact that I did it now because I can make sure that they're going to stay sturdy and strong, and it's not going to release any of the tension on the wire even in heavy rains. So I think it actually worked out a little better to my benefit. Now these cross posts actually go into the ground against the bottom of this post, and that also helps just kind of secure things in place. This fencing was a lot of trouble, and originally we weren't going to put it all up right here, but I like what we're doing with it. I like how we're starting to lay out some of our land for livestock. And when I was reading up about longhorns and cows that like to jump, it feels invigorating to them. A lot of people were saying you've got to put the cow down. You can't pass that cow off onto somebody else. You can't keep it on your property. It's not safe. But the answer really is to just build a stronger fence, build a fence that will hold the cow. We like Lisa. We don't want her to go anywhere. She's a friendly cow. She's a fun-loving cow. She just wants to get out and go explore places. If she sees a tree that has leaves on it, she wants to eat. She prefers leaves off of trees over grass. She will jump the fence. Or if, in parts of our property where we have just barbed wire fencing and it's gotten loose down at the bottoms and the calves get through, well, a mama cow isn't going to let her calf stay on the other side of the fence. She's going to go right over it to be with the calf. And the problem with Lisa is the second she breaks the barrier, the other mama cow breaks the barrier and her baby will follow. So we kind of have a herd mentality that kind of moves based on, you know, what happens with the baby cows. But these baby cows that we have, and you can't really see them, they're laying down on the grass right now, but they sometimes get out and the mamas are going to get out with them. That's the reality of it. I don't think she's jumping the fences to be malicious. In fact, they have everything that they could possibly want. In our fields, they had, you know, before they had about 15 acres of just wide open grasslands with ponds and woods and everything that a cow could possibly want. And they would stay there for quite some time, and it was just periodic that they would somehow get out. But they were getting out probably because a calf went off wandering in the woods, went through one of the old fence lines, and then the others just jumped it to be with them. And so it's clear to me that our biggest problem is the old fencing around the property. It all needs to be upgraded. But with stuff like this, you could bet they're not going to challenge it. And eventually I may even add an electric fence around the interior of this fence, just to, you know, help keep them away from the fences in general. When you have a lot of property, you know, going around and checking all the fences all the time is not that easy. So I'm trying to just make sure that we're constantly keeping these things up and making sure that we're installing fences that are barriers, visual barriers to the animals, and not just some flimsy thing that they're going to test and then get out. So that's where we are now. They're all secure. They're pretty happy with their space. I think the mama cows are actually a little more relaxed than they were when they were out on the 15 acres, and that's probably because you know, right now this fence is fresh. It's still, you know, pretty tight, and so they're probably having less problems with coyotes trying to get up underneath there. And I think that probably has the mothers a little more relaxed at the moment. I'm sure they'll eventually find their way through, but being up this close to the property with fresh water troughs and feed buckets, and you know, they have a run-in shelter up here, I think that they kind of like their new space. They've nestled in very well to it. You know, the comfort of the animal is, you know, more than just giving them wide open range space and lots of amenities. It's also helping them feel secure. And I think right now, from what I could tell from watching them, they feel very secure with their new space. And that's, you know, security is a big deal to them.